Welcome to THA Talks, for free thought and open minds. Hello, I'm Paul Obatelli, and you're listening to edition 124 of THA Talks, the alternative podcast show from the UK, putting out weekly shows that are available across the globe. If you'd like to check out our full archive, just go to www.thatalks.com to listen to or to download all our free content. Our talks include news, conspiracies, spirituality, the occult, science, history, art, philosophy, religion, and much more. For anyone who'd like to contact us and give some feedback, or maybe you'd like to recommend a guest for the show, just email us at info@thatalks.com, or you can go to our website and contact us via the contact tab there. And don't forget, you can subscribe to the show via our RSS feed, and you can also find us on iTunes and Stitcher and many other podcast directories out there. Again, you can go to the website and find out more details on the best solution for you to do that. Well, hi everyone, thanks for tuning in again. It's always good to be back here on THA Talks, and it's following a very, very controversial week since the EU referendum result. Brexit won, as you all know. For those of you in the UK, I'm sure you've been feeling the airwaves. Those who are out of the UK, it's been very, very, very busy in the news. On top of that, we've also got the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, who are now looking for new leaders. And to add on top of that, we've also had that disaster in Turkey, in Istanbul, which I send my thoughts and prayers to all those who've suffered out there. So it's been just one of those weeks. One thing I've taken from the UK over the last week is how we've basically seen the government and the media so exposed more than ever, that the government are kind of taking this stance that, oh, well, we didn't think that Brexit would win, so we're a little bit flustered. When for weeks and weeks, it's been neck to neck. The polls were so tight to call, people didn't really know. And in fact, during quite a big period of that time, the polls were actually very favourable towards the Brexit vote. So when they say they didn't know, they didn't expect it, well, others did. So it's complete incompetence and dishonesty, and just I don't know what they're up to. And then in the media, the fear and the venom it's thrown towards the Brexit vote. As far as I'm concerned, they've exposed themselves. You see, because people are very easy to manipulate and control when they're afraid. Your actions, your thoughts are much easier to predict and to control. And I think that's what's going on at the moment. The UK media are bullying Brexit voters to the extreme. It's sometimes it's subtle. It's like, if I say to you the words, not all Brexit voters are racist, what I'm doing is I'm saying lots of Brexit voters are racist, because you're putting that thought in there. Although you're putting the front as being defensive of them, you're actually attacking them by saying that, because the truth is the vast majority of them are not. And, you can pick a negative group from each side. There's communist thugs on the Remain campaign that have always been about, and the media just don't really jump on those sort of people, because it's not as interesting when you have far right Nazis doing it. And so anyway, that's a little bit of a rant of mine I wanted to get out there. The only thing I'm ashamed of since this Brexit vote is my government, how they've operated, and the whole structure there, and the mainstream media, who was very, very quick to jump on a claim that 57% hate crime surge. And this actually was these statistics was taken from a Stop Hate Crime website. So basically just people reporting to that website. Now, anyone can report anything on a website, and stats are what the police are having to deal with, and the police have since confirmed that there hasn't been a 57% surge according to their duties. So, I'm not gonna water down the fact that there's a lot of idiots out there. But from both sides, there's you get the communist crew out there that are pretty degenerate and vulgar, if you ask me, as well. And then, of course, you get racist idiots out there that don't consider other people's feelings and their security. So it's one thing to address these kind of things and this online slagging off going on, and all this kind of stuff, but to create this mass hysteria and to twist information as they've done to do that, it's just it's a statement that I don't like seeing them make. I'd like to see the media be more responsible and calm that's not what they've been. So I hope that a lot of other people out there have spot what I've spot. Maybe you disagree with me, but for me, they've used it as an excuse to demonise the Brexit vote. All I'll say out there, whether you've listened to the show and you voted Remain or Brexit or for Brexit, that's your choice. That's your democratic right, your choice, and no one should bully you into regretting that. We've all got our reasons to vote. I'm Brexit. I've made no secret of that. Though I'm not even going to attack those who done Remain, because I know people were very concerned, worried. They've got jobs, families, and it was a risky vote. It's one of them things that you're taking a risk, and that's it. But the result's the result, and that's that. And I think a positive that I'm going to take out of it is that the media and the government have overextended themselves, I think, a bit. And I hope there's a lot of you out there that remember how they've acted now and have a good think about it. So yeah, I mean, I'm sort of nattering on a bit now because that's kind of like what this show is on anyway. Today we'll be speaking with Ian R. Crane, who's a very influential person in the UK here, indulging in lots of conspiracies and research regarding anything from fracking, a lot of secret society research, and just a lot of work in general in that area. And he's a great speaker. He's a great researcher. He's got his own radio show as well, I believe, and I thought it would be a really interesting idea to get Ian on the show this evening. And I've kind of squeezed this one in this week because obviously it's the subject's very fresh, and I think Ian will bring some good insight into the subject. So without any further ado, I think perhaps we should crack on. Hi there, Ian. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hi, Paul. How you doing?
Yeah, very well. I mean, it's as you're aware, it's been a really hectic few weeks actually with Brexit and a lot of other commotion going on. So I thought it'd be fantastic to get you on the show because I know you indulge very deeply in all these subjects and have always got a lot of great research. So what have you been up to recently? I mean, a lot of our listeners obviously know who you are and are familiar with your work. For those who may not have come across your work yet, I mean, give us a little bit of a synopsis about who you are and what you do.
Well, ex-oilfield, 20 years in the oilfield services industry, but I came out of the corporate world in 2000 to really focus on the study of deep geopolitics, because through the 90s I had become somewhat disenchanted with the way in which global events were unfolding and the role of the oil and gas industry in those events. And basically my realization, if you like, that things were not as was presented by the mainstream media came about as I was one of the first civilians to go into Kuwait in 1991. And it became fairly obvious to me that the wells were not set alight by the retreating Iraqi troops. They were set alight by US special forces. And the whole purpose was to demonize Saddam in the eyes of the world and to take Iraqi oil off the market. Now, you got to remember that's before the days of the internet. So, there really wasn't too much I could do in terms of getting the word out or, doing any real research. And it wasn't until 2003 that my insight was effectively confirmed when I made this comment in a presentation, which was recorded, and a member of the US Special Forces contacted the station that I was doing the interview with and confirmed that he was indeed a member of the US Special Forces teams that set the wells alight. And his account was verified by veterans today. His bona fides were confirmed. So, I mean, I think we can take it as a given that, the whole of the setting of the wells alight in Kuwait in 91 was, a classic false flag in an attempt to apply sanctions and demonize Saddam. So roll the clock forward. Basically, since I came out of the corporate world, obviously we had 9/11 in 2001, which was a seminal event. Of course, that event was forecast by Zbigniew Brzezinski in 1997 in his book, The Grand Chessboard, where he said that basically the American public would never allow or support the American government's agenda of aggression and control of the global resources, except in the event of a catastrophic and catalytic event like a new Pearl Harbor. And he was actually almost re-quoted word for word by the Project for New American Century in their report that was published in September 2000. And then, of course, when we had 9/11, and the rest, as they say, is history. So primarily, I am a researcher, presenter, broadcaster in deep geopolitics. I look at the deeper agenda and try and stimulate people's curiosity to look beyond what they see and read in the mainstream media.
Right, yeah.
So the last few years, obviously we've had a lot going on. And I was trying to raise awareness of the coming financial collapse up until 2007. After that, I was trying to raise awareness of the Codex Alimentarius agenda until 2010, when the EU introduced THUMP, the Traditional Herbal Medicines Products Directive, which effectively made all natural healthcare products illegal throughout the EU. Then I spent another couple of years trying to raise people's awareness of the coming second financial collapse, and trying to get people to understand the indicators that showed that it was just being pushed down the road by things like quantitative easing and just pumping more fake money into the equation. And then in 2012, I had just come back from Australia. I'd visited the gas fields of southern Queensland. I'd seen the horrendous devastation and the contamination that the unconventional gas or fracking industry had caused there. And literally, almost immediately, I landed back in the UK. David Cameron lifted the moratorium that had been placed on fracking in this country since the earthquakes that Quadrilla had triggered with their frack in near Blackpool in 2011. So I then spent the next 7 months touring the country. I did 63 presentations around the country in the space of 7 months, trying to raise people's awareness and get people to take an interest in this abomination that was about to be unleashed upon them. And I'm pleased to say that, fortunately, since then, there has been a phenomenal growth in the awareness around the country. There's now well over 1,000 anti-fracking groups around the country, all operating independently and autonomously. And, I'm very pleased to say that this country has still not had another frack since that one in March of 2011.
Right.
So that's pretty much what I've been doing. And then I also organized the Alternative View events. And we had AV7 in May, in the middle of May. And I did something I've never done before. I've put half of my AV7 presentation up on YouTube, and I posted that presentation at the beginning of June because I really wanted to get it out there before the EU referendum. And so you'll find it on YouTube. It's called, I think, EU referendum, the agenda to destroy the UK. And I'm pleased to say that it's had over 250,000 views. And in that presentation, I called what's actually happened. I said that I suspected that the vote would be rigged, but not in a way that most people suspected. I stated and I explained my reasons why I thought it would be rigged to take us out of the EU, and that the game plan after taking us out of the EU would be to literally destroy the country, to bring the country to its knees. And the purpose of that would be so that within 5 to 10 years, maybe even less, the population of the country are absolutely gagging to get back in the EU. And of course, at that point, entry back into the EU would only be achieved with the absolute handover of all sovereignty. So at that point, the UK would cease to exist and would be a vassal state of Brussels.
Right. Okay. Well, that's. I'm sure that's not easing anyone's fears who voted Remain at the moment. But I mean, let's say, I mean, you wouldn't. Would you have not voted for Brexit then?
Oh no, absolutely. I mean, listen, it is my opinion, and I stated this in the presentation. We absolutely have to come out and. I mean, nobody was more surprised than me last Friday morning when the result was announced. And in fact, I was woken up at 5 o'clock in the morning, to be told that a Brexit win had been announced.
Yeah.
And the reason I was surprised, because despite what I had presented, I thought that the Joe Cox incident the week before the referendum was probably sufficient to get enough emotional momentum to swing people towards Remain. I mean, it was you notice that the whole Joe Cox incident has disappeared off the media completely.
Oh yeah,
it's as though it didn't. It's as though it didn't happen.
Mm.
It mirrored what occurred in Sweden in 2003. When Sweden was about to take the referendum as to whether or not to join the euro, and the foreign minister, who was a young, beautiful politician, 2 young children, her name was Anna Lind, and she was stabbed about 4 or 5 days or so before the referendum, and she died on September the 11th of 2003. Mm. And I actually wrote in a newsletter that I put out on April 20th of this year, which is a very significant date. It's the day of sacrifice by fire, which I've spoken about many times before. But I wrote in that newsletter that we could probably expect to see a false flag incident in the run-up to the EU referendum in an attempt to swing it one way or the other. So I had suspected that the Joe Cox incident was all about swinging it towards a Remain vote. So I went to bed last Thursday night, absolutely believing that they were going to sort of publish a narrow victory for Remain. So at 5 o'clock, of course, I was pretty surprised. But this is an amazing result. I mean, I've absolutely been canvassing and encouraging people to do their own research. And you will see in the presentation from AV, those people who go look for it, if you just search for Ian Crane, AV7, and click on videos, you'll find it. And I talk about the Coudenhove-Kalergi agenda, and I show the absolutely irrefutable evidence of the agenda to literally destroy the nation state in Europe and to form a federal state through a process of gradualization. And this is an agenda that's been in place for almost 100 years, so it's nothing new. And, what is really shocking, of course, is that neither the Leave nor the Remain campaign or anybody else ever mentions the Coudenhove-Kalergi agenda. And there's a biannual award, the Coudenhove-Kalergi Award, which is given to the politician, to the EU politician, that is seen as doing the most or contributing the most to destroying the nation state. And Tony Blair has been a past winner of it. Peter Sutherland, who is an Irish politician, he's been on the international stage now for, basically about at least 25 years, or even longer. He's actually still the current chairman of Goldman Sachs International. He's former chairman of BP, former Irish Attorney General. He has been an EU commissioner. He was chairing the GATT talks. He went on to become the founding director general of the World Trade Council. He's one of the founding members of the European Trilateral Commission. So you get the picture. This guy's very, very well connected. And he gave a presentation to the House of Lords in the middle of 2012, where basically he said that the EU effectively needs to let go of any national identity. It needs to open up its borders, and he wasn't just saying this about the UK, by the way. He's been saying it every other European nation. Just open the floodgates, and their agenda is literally to mongrelize. Now, listen very carefully, because I'm using the word of Count Coudenhove-Kalergi, to mongrelize the population of Europe while protecting the purity of the aristocratic bloodline and also the spiritual elite. And I'll leave you to work out for yourself who he was referring to when he was talking about the spiritual elite. So what he was saying was that the traditional aristocracy and the spiritual elite should protect the purity of their bloodline, but make sure that the bloodlines of the proletariat, of the masses in Europe, were so intermixed that there was no national identity amongst them whatsoever. And in fact, Sarkozy, President Sarkozy, just before he left office, gave a speech in which he stated in that speech that it was the duty of every Frenchman to marry interracially. And he said, and if people didn't do it voluntarily, they find a way to incentivize them. So, this is a very clear part of the agenda. And as you'll see in the presentation, I do make the observation this is not a one-dimensional issue by any stretch of the imagination, because obviously a lot of the migration that's taking place is as a direct result of the illegal wars that the Britain and America in particular, but not exclusively, have been causing over the last 70 odd years. Primarily that's the US, but of course in a week or so we will have the release of the Chilcot inquiry, and in the aftermath of the Brexit vote, we have what appears to be the political class in absolute meltdown. But let's understand some of the things that are going on here. Because first of all, the only reason the Labour Party's in turmoil is because they're desperately trying to protect their hero, Tony Blair. Yeah. Jeremy Corbyn has stated categorically in the past that, in his opinion, Tony Blair should be charged with the war crimes. And I think that 97% of the population of this country and many other countries would agree with that. I mean, the guy is a war criminal of the highest order.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so, when the Chilcot inquiry comes out, it's fully expected that, the blame is going to be laid very firmly at Tony Blair's door. I mean, by the way, the likes of Alistair Campbell, in my opinion, should be right up there with him. But of course, ultimately, the buck stopped with Tony. And in the scheme of things, actually, Tony Blair is a very, very weak individual. He's easily manipulated. And of course, he needs to pay the price.
Right.
And so, he's right now, his Blairites are desperately trying to protect him by getting Corbyn out of the way, off the leadership platform, before the Chilcot inquiry is released. And I hope they fail.
Right.
And then, of course, we have the Tories in meltdown, because the bottom line is Boris and Michael Gove were leading the Brexit campaign, but they didn't have a game plan. I mean, the bottom line is that, literally, Boris and Michael Gove should have been calling for Article 50 to be invoked, literally, the moment the result of the referendum was announced.
Yeah.
But, we saw Boris saying, well, it wasn't an overwhelming majority, was it? No, but it was a majority. Mm. There wasn't a requirement for an overwhelming majority one way or the other. And by the way, there is an increasing amount of evidence to suggest that the vote was manipulated, but downwards, because the actual exit vote, I think, was a lot higher. And in fact, people in Scotland just do not believe that Scotland voted to remain. 80% of the population of Scotland lives across the central belt. They're tight communities. I mean, they talk to each other. And, the feedback is that they're incredulous that supposedly Scotland voted to remain in the EU when, it's looking for independence. And, the Scots are smart enough to realise that if they want true independence, they don't get that if they're part of the EU.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I've got a friend in Scotland myself, and he's married to a Scottish woman living up there, and he said, "Oh, I think we'll surprise people. A lot of people I speak to, they're gonna vote out." And so I was half expecting Scotland to be a little bit more pro-Brexit than they were, but yes, maybe all right. But I mean, looking at the doom and gloom that we can look at, do you think there's a chance that this could work in Britain's favour? That I mean, there's a lot of people that want to trade with Britain at the moment. Obviously, that the transfer, the change, that's always kind of predicted to be a turbulent ground. But do you see any optimism from this, or do you think we're in for a bit of a tough time?
But listen, the optimism is absolutely dependent upon people getting involved. Because if people just sit back and let it all go on around them, then they might as well bend over and apply the Vaseline now.
Yeah.
Because, the political classes are going to shaft the British public in a big way. And they fully expect the British public just to bitch, to whinge, to moan, to make posts on Facebook or whatever, but not get involved. And then they'll just carry on, doing what they're doing on behalf of their puppet masters. And, of course, they'll reap the big rewards. They'll get their salary, their expense accounts, and we know that the MPs are milking it on the expense accounts. We've got a bunch of MEPs that are, with the exception of the UKIP contingent, are now, and one or two others, are, really fed up that they've lost their gravy train. God knows what the Kinnocks are going to do now, because, of course, they've made a literal fortune out of being parasites, in the EU. So, the optimism is that this has, I think, awakened a lot of interest in the political arena. Now, and I'm talking right across the generations. We're seeing in the media, how the young generation are really frustrated because the older generation have ruined their future. You know what? Only 36% of the under 35s could actually be asked to go under 25s could actually be asked to go and vote.
That's right, yeah.
That's right. And most of us who are in our, late 50s, early 60s and beyond can actually remember life before the EU. And let me tell you, it was way better.
Oh, yeah.
The EU has destroyed family life in this country. It's created a culture of debt, and that's not just unique to the UK. Of course, it is the EU has destroyed the economies of Greece, of Spain, of Portugal, of Italy, certainly of Ireland. France isn't in great shape right now, and the media are not reporting it in the UK, of course, but France has had rioting on the streets for the last 4 months now in cities right across France. And Germany's not in too great shape either. Deutsche Bank is probably going to need a bailout sometime soon, or bail in. It'll take the money from the depositors rather than the government. For me, those people who want to remain in the EU, it's a condition akin to Stockholm syndrome. We've been captive to the EU for 44 years. And, of course, people who are under the age of 50 certainly know no different. So, that's what they know. They become very comfortable. Whereas those people, who are old enough to remember that life pre the EU, will remember that was a time when there was a full employment, a family could live on the wage of one wage earner. Now, back then, of course, it was normally the father. If mothers worked, it was by choice, because generally they didn't have to, because the average wage earned by the main wage earner in the family was sufficient to support the family, to either pay a mortgage, because houses were reasonably priced, or pay, rent, to keep food on the table, and, all the basics, maybe not in any kind of great luxury. But if the wife did work, or the mother did work, it was purely by choice.
Yeah.
Today, young people, young families don't have that choice. Those that do are the exception as opposed to the rule.
I mean, I think even in my life, I mean, I haven't been alive as long as some of the older voters, but I've seen how from my youth how the world has changed, in the country's changed under that format, and it's just much more compressed. Everything, there's just less freedom. Let everything, with even within the music industry and the arts and stuff, it's just much more single. It's more sort of centralized in the control of fewer hands. So there's less influencing it, and as a result, everyone's getting more closed-minded as well. And it's just
a horrendous culture of political correctness.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Which of course, one of the first things that political correctness does is shut down free speech. The next thing it does is destroy humour, because you can't make fun of anything because that's politically incorrect. And all of this is about shutting down debate, shutting down curiosity. And one of the things that I find really quite staggering is the speed with which people will get offended. And my good friend, the comic Steve Hughes, he has a great sketch where he says, if you're offended, you're offended. Deal with it. It's your problem, not mine. And he said, so what? What's the impact of being offended? You're not going to die from it.
That's it. Yeah.
So just deal with it. And the speed with which people react, and also one of the negative effects of social media is this perception that unless someone agrees with everything that you agree with, then they must be a government spy, a shill, or some other outrageous accusation. What it seems today that the culture is one where we have lost the ability to understand that it's okay to disagree. We can have differences of opinion, and it's okay. We can still be friends. We just have to agree to disagree. And in my generation, some of the people I work with, we have vastly different views. And there's one or two subjects that we might elect not to discuss with each other because we know we have vastly different views, and we don't want to get into a heated debate about it. But we know what those views are. But that doesn't impact on, our friendship. And obviously there are other elements where we can talk and we do discuss. You keep it on an even keel, because that's what debate is all about. And yet what is being created is literally a culture of clones.
Yeah, well, a lot of people have been, I say a lot of people, a few people on the internet, they've actually been trying to campaign to get Nigel Farage arrested for hate speech. In other words, arrested for disagreeing speech. It's actually quite frightening when I see that, because some of these people, I know them as well, and so I'm thinking, how did that happen? Jeez,
Well, and again, don't be surprised if this is a deliberate part of the ramping up of the confrontation that the establishment want to create within families, within communities, because it's the divide and rule, divide and conquer mentality. We've got there's a big event in London apparently on Saturday, the 4th of July.
Oh, yeah,
no, the 2nd of July. Saturday, the 2nd of July. There's a big event, a mass rally, and it's the Remain campaign. Guys, what point don't you get? There was a referendum, and the result was to come out. What are we going to have? A referendum on a referendum on a referendum?
Yes.
And I know that there is a game plan to hold a second referendum. And of course, what they want to do, that's why they've manipulated it so that it was only 52-48. There was only 1.3 million votes in the vote. Well, you know what? Next time it has to be even more, because they're going to try and do an island on us, and they're going to say, well, it was very close, and we think people have calmed down, they've cooled down, they've reflected on their decision. A lot of people who voted out will now vote in. But we have to make sure that people understand that this is like being in a toxic relationship, and there's a mentality with people who find themselves going from one toxic relationship to another. And even when people know that if they go back and cohabit with somebody who's abused them, whether that's physically or emotionally, the likelihood is that they're going to be abused again. They're desperately hoping that there's going to be a change in the behavior, but in their deep down, they know that basically that's not going to happen. And that's exactly what the deal is with the EU. I mean, it shouldn't be any great surprise that, here we are, just about a week. It's exactly a week after the referendum now. And already the EU are, talking about imposing the CETA trade agreement. This is the Canadian-European Union trade agreement. And this is, of course, the forerunner to TTIP. And Juncker has said that, this will be forced upon all member states. There will not be an opportunity for member states to tweak it, as they want to. There's no point in them discussing it in their own parliaments because it's just going to be imposed. We also know that had the vote gone the other way, then what was going to be announced literally the following day was the establishment of an EU military. So, people need to. Actually, I think that in the opportunity that we've got between last Thursday's referendum and whenever it is that they think they can stage the second referendum, is that we'll have the opportunity to see just how much more dominion Brussels has taken unilaterally, because it's desperate to now try and hang on to the 27 member states, despite the fact there is an increasing call within those states for them to have a referendum, just the same as we've had in the UK. But the onus is on us. And when I say us, I mean all of us, the collective we. Those of us that have been studying the geopolitical arena, for any length of time, know that this agenda does not have the best interests of humanity at heart. It is a global corporatist agenda, and the nature of the beast is to literally asset strip the planet. These socio-psychopaths, it's not about money. They can print all the money they want and then charge us, the interest on it. Yeah. And it's not about money. It's about total control. These socio-psychopaths see humanity as a slave race. And if we allow ourselves to be manipulated into a further shafting, then their attitude will be, well, we gave you a chance. We gave you a chance. We gave you your Brexit vote, and then you didn't do anything with it. You just sat back and let us ride roughshod over you, so you're not worthy of having any kind of self-determination. So it's absolutely, my call, if you like, to people is, it doesn't matter what you get involved in. There's so many issues out there, some on a local level, some on a national level, some on a global level. But whatever issue you feel most strongly about, get involved, because the establishment don't care why you don't get involved, as long as you don't get involved. Because if you don't get involved, you're not in their way and you're not a problem to them.
Right. I mean, what do you think is the realistic chance that maybe some other nations might opt out as well? Because it seems the EU, rather than thinking, look, well, although they've said it, they seem to be, I mean, are they going to go in the way that they're going to reform and loosen up, or are they going to go the other way and be very aggressive and just try and hold everyone by their throats?
Well, I think that, they're probably going to go for the latter. I mean, obviously, the more rational politicians within the EU are saying, look, we need to take this as a lesson. We need to understand why this has happened. Well, it's not rocket science. They've been living life high on the hog in their ivory towers in Brussels and in Strasbourg. Meanwhile, obviously, at least 52% of the population feels that they've been shafted by the EU over the last 44 years. And, it shouldn't be any great surprise that when you look at the way in which people voted, in London and the South East, it's a bubble. And people, generally there, there's reasonably full employment. The salaries on offer are reasonable. Even the people earning on 0 hours contracts are not on minimum wage. But, once you get into the northern parts of the country, once you get across the central belt, say the M62 area, and you get up into, the Blackburn and Burnley and Darwin, and across these areas, then it's a different world. And there's so many people in the southeast that have never been in these places. They have no idea what life is like in these places, and life for these people is tough, and it's been made tougher, of course, by the likes of Ian Duncan Smith, with his policies whilst he was running the Department of Work and Pensions. I mean, Ian Duncan Smith probably has, he has more domestic blood on his hand than even Tony Blair. Tony Blair, his bloodthirst was quenched, by overseas wars. Ian Duncan Smith, of course, is guilty of manslaughter of literally thousands of people in this country whilst he was in charge of the Department of Work and Pensions. And, the outrageous sanctions that were being applied by Atos and now Maximus, where these companies were literally incentivizing their front of house staff to find ways to sanction people from receiving the benefits that they were lawfully entitled to. So, it's a combination of the EU and, of course, domestic government. And that's why, we're not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination, because, if not that the EU was putting any constraints on the outrageous behaviour of the Tory government or the Labour administrations, prior to 2010. But that's why it is that, this time round, the British people have really got to let it be known that they're just not going to sit back and let these parasites, live their lives high on the hog in total ignorance of the suffering that's going on around the rest of the country. So, what I hope happens is I hope that Jeremy Corbyn, gets a massive majority. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn is, he's untried, untested. He's not necessarily the most charismatic performer in front of a camera, but he's a genuine man. I'm not a Labour supporter, by the way. I'm not a supporter of any political party, but Jeremy Corbyn is at least a man of the people. And in fact, I don't think he could say what he really wanted to say in the run up to the referendum, because he's being gagged by the game makers behind the scenes. Yeah. Now he's up against Angela Eagle. Well, Angela Eagle, I mean, I heard a rumor that over the weekend she's going to have a charisma transplant. Because, I mean, there's no possibility that this woman's got any kind of fundamental leadership capability whatsoever. So if she somehow manages to become leader of the Labour Party is effectively finished. Yeah. It's dead in the water. So Jeremy Corbyn is the one, of course, that the Blairite community within the Labour Party are desperate to remove so they can protect Tony's butt from a war crimes tribunal. But, of course, if Jeremy does come into play, then it does mean that we've got a political arena which actually gives us an opportunity to make some real change. If Angela Eagle somehow becomes the Labour leader, then you can pretty much watch Boris and or Theresa May and Michael Gove literally destroy this country. And, one of the reasons that I've said all along that this is, a psyop on the British people is because we have David Cameron, who's a Bullingdon boy, Boris Johnson, a Bullingdon boy of the same era, and who is managing the Tory party behind the scenes? Oliver Letwin, who's a Bullingdon boy again from the same era. So, they're playing every side of the coin here. And David Cameron, he might look a bit sort of weary right now, but of course, if he leaves office, he's going to go into the mega bucks, and enjoy the similar sort of outrageous wealth that Tony Blair has managed to cream since he left office. So, I don't feel sorry for these guys in any way, shape, or form. But, it all comes back. Are we going to stand and sit back and watch this? Because, I'd encourage people, go join your local Labour Party or go join your local Tory party. Let's get involved. Yeah. And let's make sure that the politicians are held to account. And the other thing that I would certainly advocate is that anybody standing for public office must declare not only their financial interests, but also their relationship with any of the organizations that try to manipulate events, like Common Purpose, like Freemasonry, like the Oddfellows, the Jesuit order, the Knights of Malta, although that list I think is pretty public. But we need to know, the British public needs to know where the loyalties to these people lie. And if they are a staunch supporter of the Friends of Israel, or they declare themselves to be arch-Zionists, as Michael Gove has done, for example, then the British people need to know it. And the British people need to be able to ask the questions. Because where is their first loyalty? Is their first loyalty to this country, to the people of Britain, or is their first loyalty to an overseas state that is we are not squeaky clean when it comes to overseas terrorism, but the overseas state in the Levant that I refer to has a far worse track record than the UK. And we need to know where these loyalties lie. And what we need politicians that have the well-being of the people of this country at the heart, the absolute heart of their manifesto and their long-term agenda, and not the interests of the corporations.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not a Labour supporter as such myself, but there's something about Jeremy Corbyn. I can't dislike him totally. I mean, he's a few of the things he said, I've kind of thought, you could have said that differently, and he just doesn't come across as very patriotic, and that as a leader of a nation, in my opinion, should be. But having said that, I think there is definitely, like what you were pointing out, there's definitely something that he's not quite sitting in with the establishment. There's something not quite, they don't like him. So for that reason, I can't criticise him, because I'd quite like to see him stick around as the Labour leader. Even though I think and maybe he's the answer. Maybe he's the answer to make the Labour Party not being corrupt anymore.
Listen, I mean, he's done extremely well, obviously, and I'm sure probably no one's more surprised than he is to find himself as the leader of the Labour Party. But now, if Jeremy Corbyn could actually grow a set,
I think that's what
become his own man.
Yeah.
Instead of being reliant on the advisors who are all being played by external forces, if Jeremy Corbyn became his own man, he's a man of the people, and the people will, because they've already demonstrated that they will support him. And now he needs to rise on that support and not keep looking around him to see whether or not he's getting the nod from his advisors. He needs to become his own man. And if he is capable of that, then I think he will become not only a formidable leader, but he will actually go down in history as the man that led this country out of the corporatist grip that we've been in for the last 44 years. And let's not forget that the timing of our exit is also crucial, because the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, which is coming down the road at a phenomenal rate of knots, CETA, the Canadian trade agreement with the European Union, is the sort of forerunner of that. But then TTIP, it would literally establish a raft of legislation that would give the corporations supremacy even over the European courts. The European courts have had supremacy over British courts since 1972 with the advent of the European Communities Act. Now, that needs to be repealed. Article 50 needs to be invoked, and we need to make very sure that the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, people in Europe are starting to become very, very aware of how pernicious this trade agreement will be. But we have to make sure that Britain is nowhere near TTIP if and when that is signed. As you rightly said, Paul, when you started the show, Britain has an amazing opportunity here. There are already countries lining up to negotiate trade deals with Britain, and we're no longer tied by the deals that are established in Brussels that were protecting particular interests. We now have an opportunity to negotiate deals that are in the best interests of the people of this country.
Yeah, Well, we're kind of pressing towards that time, and I know one of the subjects that you've been campaigning about for a long time is the fracking. How's about if you tie this up? I mean, what's the chances now of fracking? Either are we going to frack less or more now we're supposedly leaving the EU?
Okay, frankly, I don't think that membership of the EU has any bearing whatsoever on the unconventional gas industry. I mean, certainly with a Tory government or even with a UKIP government, then they would be pushing ahead to establish unconventional gas exploitation in this country. The only way in which this could be shut down at a government level is, I think, with a Labour government. Because I think there are enough people within the Labour Party who are more inclined to listen to what their constituents are saying. And I think that there's a very good chance that a Labour government would either put a moratorium, an indefinite moratorium, or an outright ban on unconventional gas exploitation. But we've got another few years before a general election. So the next few years are going to be absolutely crucial. And let me make this very clear. And I've made this statement consistently for the last 3.5 years now. And that is that ultimately the only thing that shuts down the unconventional gas industry is going to be the community, the local community, letting it be known that not only do they not support it, but they will do everything, and I mean everything, non-violent, of course, but they will do everything within their means to prevent that industry from becoming established in their community. Now, communities around the country, in Sussex, in Lancashire, in East Yorkshire, in North Yorkshire, in Scotland, have all done a fantastic job of making it as difficult as possible for these unconventional gas companies to get permission to start drilling, exploratory drilling. But that's not enough. That's caused the delays that we've seen so far. But now we're getting to the point, and of course, Third Energy in North Yorkshire were given permission to frack a well at Kirby Misperton in North Yorkshire, right on the edge of the village. In fact, it's less than 500 meters or so from the village. It's less than a kilometer from the entrance to Flamingo Land, which is North Yorkshire's largest revenue earner in terms of the tourist industry. And Third Energy now have permission to frack this well at Kirby Misperton. And if they are able to frack that well at Kirby Misperton, then there is no question that that is going to give the unconventional gas industry the perception that if they can overcome the community in North Yorkshire, they can overcome communities anywhere. It might cost them a little bit more, but if they just keep at it, then they can overcome. So ultimately, once all other avenues have been explored, and if your elected representatives are just totally ignoring you, as a Tory government will certainly do, then all you are left with is literally doing whatever it takes to prevent those trucks from getting onto the well site, using whatever peaceful means are at the community's disposal. So this is my counsel. My counsel is, wherever you're living, if you are living in an area that is licensed for unconventional gas exploitation, and that means pretty much anywhere in the north of England, with the exception of the High Pennines, and then there's various pockets in the south and southwest. But if you are living in an area that is licensed for unconventional gas exploitation, if you're not involved with the local anti-fracking community in working to try and prevent this industry from becoming established, then effectively you are giving the gas companies effectively your permission to come into your area. And these communities need to get the message across that social license is not being granted. The gas companies use this phrase social license, and their interpretation of it is that social license is, can we get the local community to the point where there's not enough of them to actually stop us doing what we want to do? And yes, we know there's always going to be a few opponents, but we can deal with them. They're just an inconvenience. can we get the majority of the community just to simply roll over and say, oh, well, we tried, what a shame, and the trucks roll into town. So the communities now have to show that, there is no social license whatsoever, and that this industry will not be permitted to become established in this country. And if it does become established in this country, I sadly will state with unfortunate confidence that the water, the soil, and the air in large tracts of this country will become contaminated within a generation. And that's not based on any conjecture. That's simply extrapolating what has happened everywhere else around the world where this industry has managed to get a foothold. When I came back from Australia 18 months ago, I did some filming while I was out there. I put a documentary together. It's called Voices from the Gas Fields. It's on YouTube, and it's a 1-hour documentary. There's a shorter version of 20 minutes for people that don't have the attention span to watch an hour's documentary. But, watch that documentary, because what has happened in southern Queensland in the space of just 10 years, it's only 10 years since this industry got a foothold in southern Queensland. And southern Queensland, of course, is a lot less densely populated than the UK, but it has destroyed southern Queensland. It's caused farmers to go out of business. It's caused one farmer, George Bender, to reach the point where he just committed suicide because he just couldn't take it anymore. And so it's not difficult to see what will happen in this country if this insidious industry gets a foothold here.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, that is pretty much what we got time for. Is it? It's been great speaking to you. And I mean, I guess the main thing we can take from all this is what we need now in the country is a bit of unity to focus on these things. And because I think what tends to happen is people kind of protest and break off into different groups, and we need to have a bit more unity, even if we haven't got the same things in common, different political spectrums, left or right. But it'd be nice if some groups could pull people together, because I think, as you said earlier, I think a bit of unity is what you need, and hopefully we can develop that a bit more over the coming weeks.
Well, we have to, Paul. We have to focus on the things that we agree on.
Yeah.
We're never going to agree on everything, and wouldn't life be boring if we agreed on everything? I mean,
Absolutely,
it would just it'd be incredibly boring. We all love a good debate. So, yeah. But we've got to focus on what we agree on, and I think that one of the fundamentals that we can all agree on is that everybody who is resident in this country is entitled to a decent life, and that means the means to ensure that there is a decent roof over their head, that they're able to put food on the table, that they're able to clothe their family, and they're able to have a little bit of spending money. And, basically, it's not going to necessarily happen overnight, but, that's where we came from. That was the situation that we were in, 45, 50 years ago, yeah, where unemployment was almost non-existent, where the first time that people got themselves into debt was when they took out a mortgage. And that mortgage was never more than 2.5 and very rarely 3 times their salary, so that it was always affordable. Now we've got 3 times their annual salary, that is. Now we've got people borrowing outrageous sums of money, with no possibility of actually paying off that mortgage. So what they're literally banking on the prospect of the property increasing in value and then being able to pay off the mortgage when eventually they sell the property. So we've got to get back to a much more balanced lifestyle. What we've developed in this country over the last certainly 30 years is a culture of greed. It's all about greed. It's all about what can I get out of this? And let me tell you, I've come from living high on the hog, working overseas in the oil and gas industry. Today I have nothing. Today, my primary residence is a caravan in a field in the southwest of England, and I've never been happier. I have the most amazing home office in the country. And of course, when you've got nothing, then you can actually become quite active, which is why Rafting Energy bankrupted me a couple of months ago, because I challenged them to prevent them from getting their drill bits in the ground in East Yorkshire. And I'm pleasantly pleased to see that the well site that we prevented them accessing has now been returned to agricultural use.
Brilliant.
And that wasn't just down to me by any stretch of the imagination. It was down to, some very determined protectors, but more importantly, it was down to the local community, because once the protection camp had gone, the local community realized that basically the only way in which Racing Energy were going to be run out of town was if they actually got involved and went up to the gates, and every time a truck went in, they effectively shut it in there. And they wouldn't let it out until much later. And eventually Racing Energy realized that there was no way they had the social license, and the only smart thing to do was to shut down the well site. And that's a classic example of what communities can achieve.
Yeah, right, great. Well, that is all we got time for. I mean, is there anything you'd like to let our listeners know? Any projects, websites you'd like to promote before we wrap it up?
Well, I would say, look, I've got a plethora of information and videos on my YouTube channel. That's the Ian R. Crane YouTube channel, and then the AV, the Alternative View events. The first 6 events, or all of the presentations from those events, which include such people as David Bellamy, Johnny Ball, Michael Shrimpton, fantastic speaker, of course, also a former barrister that upset the establishment, and they ended up accusing him of being psychologically imbalanced to put him in jail. He spoke at the recent AV7 event, but all of the AV events up to AV6 are all on the Alternative View YouTube channel. So if people want to see a little bit more and get into a bit more of this on a deeper basis, Ian R. Crane and Alternative View YouTube channels.
Brilliant. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come on the show, Ian. It's been really good to listen to your perspective on things, and maybe be cool to get you back on the show again in the future when more events have unfolded, and we can sort of assess where we are in the future at some point.
Absolutely, and I would encourage people to look at this video that I recorded in middle of May. EU referendum. The plan to destroy the UK, the agenda to destroy the UK.
Great. Well, I'm sure our listeners will go and check that out. And till the next time, Ian, thank you again.
Thanks a lot, Paul.
And that was Ian R. Crane. Yep, some interesting stuff there, and I think we concluded it well at the end there. I think it's a time for a bit more, a bit of unity if we can. I mean, I know it's probably a tall order to ask for complete unity, but I think it's something we need to hope for in the coming weeks, months, years. We don't know what's going to unfold in the next few weeks, next months, and years. But we do know how we can react to it. That's the way I see. And I think the thing is, sometimes life would be a bit boring if it was all just mundane and the same old. Sometimes you need a bit of a shake-up to make us look at ourselves and look at each other and that kind of thing. I know there's a lot of people are so intense at the moment. Some of my friends saying to me, friends of mine, they look at me as if they despise me, and it brings out the ugliness sometimes when people are sort of afraid of what's going on and change and this and that. And I think sometimes you just got to embrace the change and the challenges, and it can make life interesting. We're here to be alive and to take on challenges and learn and that kind of stuff. Maybe sometimes a good shake-up is what you need. So that's my positive slant on it, and I think it's the best way to look at it, in my opinion. Let me know what you thought of Ian's views today, if you'd like to add to them and to agree with him, or maybe you've got some other challenging views you'd like to throw into the equation and have us bring someone else on the show with some other perspectives. That's what we like here on the show. As you've probably already noticed, I am on my own. No David, no Shana. But it was a bit of a quick fix, this show, as it was something I'd managed to get in touch with Ian, and we'd agreed to do the show in quite short notice because I just thought it was quite relevant with what's been going on in the last couple of weeks or so. So it was just one that I threw out there on my own. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll be looking forward to coming back here again real soon with David and Shana and some other fantastic guests that we have got lined up. And I'm sure life isn't going to be boring from here on in. I think we're going to have lots of subjects to indulge in. And let's not forget the spiritual side, because I think that is extremely important. And I think that's pretty much our salvation, is spirituality. I think we've really got to remember that. I mean, there may be some atheists listening in saying, no, sorry, not for me, and that's fine. But then getting stuck into some really weird science that makes your brain tick and makes you think, God, there's so much more to life than all this anyway. And I think that's quite a saviour in itself. And I'm going to stop mumbling now. I'm getting pretty tired, and I'm going to go and have a bit of grub and get some sleep. And whatever you're doing, I hope it's a good one. Take care of yourselves, be brave, and keep telling your friends about the show, keep linking the show, and more importantly, keep downloading the show. We really appreciate all those that do promote the show for us, and all you guys out there listening. That makes it more worthwhile. Till the next time, I'll be seeing you. Take care. Bye.